Okay, let's jump in. Today we are really unpacking the extraordinary and often turbulent life of Reverend Sun Myung Moon.
Mm.
I mean, this is a figure whose biography reads like a study in relentless global mission, but it's set against this backdrop of constant, sometimes violent conflict.
That's exactly right. His journey, it just encapsulates some of the most dramatic ideological and political battles of the 20th century.
For sure.
We're looking at someone who goes from, surviving a Soviet-style Gulag in North Korea to confronting presidents and founding these massive global media and interreligious organizations.
So our mission today.
Our mission is to really distill that core narrative and some of the specific details from the sources, focusing on the fundamental beliefs that fueled his mission and just the incredible scale of his global reach.
So for you, the listener, you're going to get a detailed understanding of the timeline, the intense persecution he faced, and the surprising way he approached reconciliation.
We have to start with the foundational context, right? A life forged by war and occupation.
Born in 1920 in what is now North Korea, he was the son of Presbyterian farmers, educated in Confucian schools, and living under the brutal oppression of the Japanese occupation.
And the sources really highlight that. The cruelty and the religious intolerance of the Japanese regime and just the suffering he witnessed daily. That drove his initial, very deeply spiritual quest for answers.
He was fundamentally troubled by it.
Yeah, I mean, if God existed and religion promised a just world, why was human suffering so widespread and just so enduring? He saw this huge, painful gap between the spiritual ideal and the physical reality.
And he felt the established religions just weren't cutting it.
They were failing to bridge it. And that realization, that's what pushed him into this profoundly personal search for truth.
This intense personal quest leads to what is really the core turning point, the Divine Commission.
Mm.
This happened early Easter morning in 1935 while he was praying intensely in the Korean mountains, a very significant place in the culture.
It was a very specific and really dramatic revelation. According to the sources, Jesus Christ appeared to the young moon and gave him a clear mandate
Which was?
to continue, and this is the key word, complete the work Jesus had started nearly 2,000 years before.
So establishing God's physical kingdom on earth and bringing about permanent peace.
Exactly.
And what's so fascinating is that the sources say his initial reaction wasn't, immediate acceptance.
No, not at all. He was, understandably, just overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the task. And he refused it at first. He only agreed after this period of intense reflection and prayer.
That hesitation, it really underscores the weight of the commission, doesn't it?
It does. And once he committed, the next 6 years, from 1935 to 1941, were devoted entirely to what he called the quest for truth.
And the central puzzle was this. If the crucifixion brought spiritual salvation, why was Jesus' mission considered incomplete?
Right. He had to identify the precise spiritual and physical roots of human sin and suffering.
And his method for this, as the sources describe it, was just absolutely rigorous.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just reading the Bible. He would pose these specific, deep theological questions and then research answers through, well, every available scripture, scientific text, philosophical tradition.
And he combined that study with fervent prayer and rigorous fasting, seeking confirmation for his findings directly from God.
The result was the fundamentals of the divine principle, or unification principles, which was completed by the time he was 25.
And here's the core theological insight that comes out of that.
The sources state that the root of sin wasn't just, a broken law. It was the failure of the first humans to achieve full physical and spiritual maturity.
So salvation then required transforming human character and family life, not just believing something.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fundamental shift from individual spiritual rescue to this grander societal and familial transformation.
That reframing of the human condition is, well, it's powerful. And there's this one unique detail about the guidance he received that kind of foreshadows the interreligious nature of his later work.
You're talking about who he met in the spirit world.
Yeah. The sources say he was guided directly by figures like Abraham, Moses, Jesus, but also Muhammad and Buddha.
That's a radical departure from traditional Christian theology. It really confirms his direction. If the goal is world peace, the foundation has to be some kind of universal truth that transcends religious boundaries.
So that interreligious guidance, it wasn't just window dressing, it was foundational.
Absolutely. It was the foundation for his later global peace initiatives.
So armed with this framework, he enters the world stage just as World War II is ending and the Cold War is starting up.
And that leads us right into part two, these years of wartime persecution, and the beginning of his pioneer ministry.
After high school, he studied electronic engineering in Japan for a bit at a Waseda affiliate.
Right, and while he was there, he quickly became a Christian leader in the Korean independence movement against the Japanese occupation. So he's immediately positioned in political resistance.
But what's surprising is his early stance on unity. The sources say his school friends included communists.
Yeah, and while he fundamentally disagreed with their atheism, he defended their sincere dedication to creating a utopian, free Korea. He argued that all Koreans should just work together.
This political activity led to, well, immediate consequences.
It did. He was quickly imprisoned and tortured by the Japanese for his student underground activities and for refusing to reveal the names of his collaborators.
And this was only the first of what would become 6 separate imprisonments.
That's under 4 different governments: Japan, North Korea, South Korea, and even the United States.
So after Korea's liberation, he comes home, organizes the Divine Principle, and his plan is to work with the existing Korean Christian churches. But that didn't go well.
No, it was met with immediate conflict and rejection. The established Korean ministers, they grew jealous of his impact and accused him of false teachings.
And the American missionaries.
They just disregarded him entirely. They saw him as an unschooled country preacher. He realized very quickly he was going to be on a lonely, pioneering path.
And then, in 1946, comes this dramatic and incredibly dangerous command,
God tells him to leave his family immediately and travel north to Pyongyang.
which was known as the Jerusalem of the East, but by 1946, it was firmly controlled by Soviet-backed communists.
It was basically a death sentence for an active Christian leader, and the danger was realized almost immediately.
He was arrested the moment he started preaching in 1946.
Tortured so severely that his body was just tossed into the prison yard, presumed dead, before some dedicated followers managed to retrieve him.
And he survived.
Miraculously.
Yeah.
He survived, recovered, and immediately went back to preaching.
Which led to his second arrest in 1948, and this is where he ends up in the notorious Hungnam prison.
And we need to pause here because the sources are specific. This was not a standard prison.
No.
This was a Soviet-style Gulag, an extermination camp designed to literally work prisoners to death. Few people lasted 6 months.
Yet he endured for nearly 3 years.
It's remarkable. And it culminates in this dramatic, almost cinematic escape during the Korean War. The camp was liberated by UN forces in June 1950, just hours before his scheduled execution.
Hours. He was minutes away from death.
And what truly defines his dedication is what he did next. Instead of just fleeing south to safety.
He spent 40 days searching the wreckage of Pyongyang for his scattered followers.
And when he finally started his trek south, he finds a follower with a broken leg.
Right.
And he insists on bringing the injured man with him, either pushing him on a bicycle or physically carrying him on his back for the entire journey.
That willingness to risk his own freedom, even after escaping execution, to save one person, it just defines the spirit of that early movement.
It absolutely sets the stage for what came next.
Which is part 3, starting all over again in the South and founding a global movement. He arrives as a refugee in Busan.
And he starts literally from zero. I mean, he built the first unification church structure from discarded army ration boxes.
Yes, ration boxes on a dusty hillside.
And the sources note that even then, in that desolate condition, he prophesied that people from all over the world would one day come to venerate that humble spot.
So in 1954, he formally founds the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, the Unification Church, in Seoul.
And almost immediately, the pattern of persecution he saw in the communist North just resurfaces in the anti-communist South.
The trouble starts when the church attracts students and professors from Ewha University.
Yes, and when key academics joined, the university administration reacted with intense persecution. And suddenly the newspapers, and this is a key detail, they start printing these sensational, unfounded stories.
Reviving old allegations of sex orgies, accusing him of being a North Korean agent.
He was arrested multiple times on trumped-up charges, including draft evasion, which is ironic because...
During the time he was accused of evading the draft, he was actually in the Hungnam Gulag.
Exactly. This really established a pattern. The sources call it a clear pattern of collusion between jealous religious leaders, certain government factions, and the media.
All working to suppress him. But the movement grew anyway, and his followers became known as the Weeping Church.
Then, by the late 50s, the mission goes global. Missionaries to Japan in 58, the U.S. in 59.
But the ideological focus really sharpened in the late 60s.
Yes, it did. In 1968, he founds the International Federation for Victory Over Communism, or IFVOC. And this was not a military organization.
No, it was ideological and educational. Their approach was to defeat communism ideologically.
Through education and a counterproposal they termed Godism.
So how did Godism actually counter communism? What was the mechanism there?
Well, it offered a philosophical alternative to dialectical materialism. Godism taught that humans, created by God, had inherent spiritual and moral values. So true utopia could only be achieved through moral, family-centered action rooted in God.
Not through state materialism and class struggle.
Exactly. It was an intellectual battle for the hearts and minds of the Cold War world.
Which sets the stage for his move to America in 1971. He saw the U.S. as this symbolic representative of the democratic world, but a world that had drifted from its spiritual ideals.
And this brings us to part 4, which is probably the most dramatic stage of conflict, the American ministry and the legal battles that followed.
He launches the Day of Hope tours, drawing massive crowds. 25,000 people at Madison Square Garden in 1974.
And this is where he enters the political maelstrom directly. In 1974, at the absolute height of the Watergate crisis, he meets with President Nixon.
And then publicly urges Americans to forgive, love, and unite.
It was incredibly controversial. Any public relations strategist would have told him not to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
But the sources suggest he acted out of principle, believing it was necessary to prevent undermining the American presidency during a peak period of the Cold War.
Whether it was principle or not, the fallout was swift and brutal. Fair media coverage just vanished.
It was replaced by open hostility. The idealism of his young followers was suddenly reinterpreted as brainwashing. He became an instant target.
This all culminates in the massive 1976 Washington Monument Rally for America's bicentennial.
He spoke to an estimated 300,000 people. It was reported as the largest religious rally assembled in D.C. up to that date.
And he called himself a doctor or a firefighter who had come to help America meet its third great test, communism.
But while he's staging these massive rallies, the U.S. government is moving against him. A whole slew of investigations are launched under political pressure.
And it all leads to this 5-year IRS investigation.
And the specific charge that comes out of it in 1983 is the key to understanding the political motivation.
He was charged with evading income taxes of less than $8,000.
Wait, less than $8,000? For a global religious leader organizing these huge events, building institutions.
That detail alone, which the sources cite, seems to confirm the political motivation. The idea was to pressure him to leave the country.
And it's documented that no one else had ever been indicted for tax evasion of such a negligible amount.
It was a targeted action, but he refused to flee. When the indictment came down, he was in Korea. His lawyers told him to stay there, no extradition treaty.
But he returned immediately to the U.S. He said, "I will not abandon my mission in America." He was going to fight the case.
He was ultimately convicted, sentenced to 18 months. And even then, the Justice Department offered him a deal.
Right. They would waive the sentence if he just left the country for good. He refused. He saw this 6th imprisonment as God's will.
And the vindication, though it came years later, was powerful. A U.S. Senate subcommittee published a report stating that injustice rather than justice has been served.
It said the case sends a strong signal that if one's views are unpopular enough, this country will find a way not to tolerate, but to convict.
And to really put a punctuation mark on that, when he was released in 1985, major Christian and civil rights leaders, people as diverse as Reverend Jerry Falwell and Reverend Joseph Lowery, held a press conference to welcome him and decry the religious persecution.
We should also note the institutional legacy from this period, founding the Washington Times in 1982, explicitly to help with the peaceful fall of communism and promote traditional values.
That work sets the stage for the final act. Part 5, the global peace initiatives of the 90s and 2000s, where he seeks reconciliation with his enemies.
This really shows his commitment to bridging the impossible. In 1990, he organizes a huge conference in Moscow and meets personally with Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev.
Urging the Soviets to turn toward God. This is a man who had been the world's most fervent opponent of communist ideology for decades.
But he taught that he loved the communist people. He separated the doctrine from the person.
But the ultimate act of reconciliation came in 1991.
When he risked his life to travel to North Korea to meet with President Kim Il-sung.
The very leader whose regime had tortured and imprisoned him in Hungnam.
It takes an astonishing amount of conviction. He went there to seek ways to bridge the gap between the Koreas. The sources say he was graciously welcomed, met with the president, and was even permitted to visit his birthplace.
The focus also shifted institutionally around this time. His wife, Hak Jahan Moon, began her own public activities in 1992.
Founding the International Women's Federation for World Peace, speaking at the UN, the Kremlin, it really institutionalized the role of women in the movement.
And the movement's main emphasis shifted in 1996. They announced the end of the Unification Church era and founded the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification.
Which reflects that core divine principle idea.
Mm.
The goal wasn't just anti-communism. It was establishing happy marriages and stable families as the real cornerstone of world peace.
This family focus then leads to these massive global interreligious councils.
Right, like the Universal Peace Federation, or UPF, in 2005. The mandate was to create a network of 110,000 ambassadors for peace and establish a global council of religious and civic leaders to supplement the UN's work by addressing moral and spiritual conflict.
And the application was immediate. After September 11th, 2001, he focused on organizing conferences on interreligious conflict, including one for Muslim leaders in Indonesia. He saw Islam as a critical partner for peace.
And finally, there's the generational continuity. In 2005 and 2006, 3 generations of the Moon family, his children and grandchildren, did a massive 120-country speaking tour to carry the message forward.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? We've looked at a life that stretches from a Christian independence fighter, a survivor of a communist gulag, a media mogul who influenced the Cold War,
And a religious figure targeted by the U.S. government, whose conviction was later called an injustice by a Senate report. The breadth of conflict and reconciliation is just staggering.
He consistently tried to bridge these seemingly impossible divides. Christianity with other world religions, strict anti-communism with personal reconciliation with Gorbachev and Kim Il-sung.
And integrating institutional religion with active political and media engagement.
So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, you should consider his core conviction, which really permeates all the sources, that the world's most difficult problems will be best solved by interreligious leaders working together.
Providing that moral and spiritual infrastructure, rather than relying on purely political or economic initiatives alone.
That theme of synthesizing faith, political action, and enemy reconciliation is a concept worth mulling over. Is that moral and spiritual foundation truly the missing piece in solving global conflict today? And, how could a federation of faith leaders even be practically integrated into global governance?